Hey, what's going on people? It's SGZ here from the SpartanGameZone, and in this video we'll be counting down the top 10 bosses to farm in Borderlands 3. Drop rates have been majorly stirred up since the last DLC drop, and no one drops the amount they used to, so I'll be letting you know what bosses you should be targeting now. We're classifying bosses as anyone with a full screen health bar, and I'll be ranking them on their difficulty and quality of loot they drop. I'll also be letting you know which legendary items they are dedicated to dropping, how often you can expect to see them, and give you tips on how to defeat them quickly. If this video helped you out, it'd be great if you could let me know by dropping a like, and if you haven't yet, then subscribing is also appreciated. And let's crack into it. We open this countdown of the top 10 bosses to farm in Borderlands 3 with Scraptrap Prime, a horde fight that you can start around here in the compactor as part of the handsome Jackpot DLC. This fight has two phases. The first consists of a spawn of Scraptrap units straight from your nightmares or dreams, I don't judge. They each share a large corrosive health bar which will drain each time you defeat one. For this fight, the Breath of the Dying is perfect, able to decimate the pack with its unique effect. However, it can be deadly to the holder, so if that's the case for you, then you can try a reflux. Once you've dealt with the nest, Scraptrap Prime will appear, Optimus's long lost cousin who still hasn't found a job. He has a few attacks similar to a badass Psycho, so if you keep your distance, you should be okay. The fight isn't difficult, but the two phases make it take longer than normal. Each kill has a 50% chance to net you a boomer, a splash damage dull SMG, or the Lucky 7, an absolute monster of a pistol on Mo's, but you can get other DLC 1 gear here too. Now for Killavolt, a main game boss that's not part of a main game mission, who you fight around here in Electra City. This boss fight unlocks after completing the quest Kill Killavolt, which you can obtain from Moxie aboard Sanctuary. It's a difficult fight if you don't come prepared. The floor will shock you constantly. He holds a shield that protects him from many attacks, and he has a massive shield but is immune to shock damage. If you want more survivability for this fight, then chuck on a transformer to prevent the arena's damage. In terms of weaponry, you want to be dishing out rad damage, as that's the best against shields other than shock, and his crit spots are the coils on his shoulders and his nickel and dimes. He also disappears at stages, but you can avoid that by dealing damage as he exits his immunity stage, and a backburner will have you dealing damage from the front. His most notable drop is the Monarch, a top tier assault rifle that'll riddle your enemies with bullets. It drops 16.5% of the time, but only on Mayhem 6 or above, and he's also the only drop source for the 9V, which you'll see 13.5% of the time. If you haven't yet, you have to hit up Killavolt for the Monarch. Whether it's a ×4 or ×8 variant, it'll do work. Now for Jackpot, the final boss of the handsome Jackpot DLC, who you fight around here in the VIP tower. Jackpot is a robot made in handsome Jack's image, which comes ready-made with not one, not two, but 3 immunity phases. Sometimes the more is not the better. When he enters them, loader bots will spawn, and taking those out will speed up his regeneration progress so you can get back to shooting. He changes attack patterns and critical spots after each phase, and is armoured in all but the last one. However, his final phase is where he's at his weakest, so sticking with a corrosive weapon throughout the entire fight is your best bet. He's the main drop source for DLC 1 class mods, which are great on Zane and Flak, and Moses isn't bad either, and you'll see one every 3rd kill. He also has the same chance to drop the Craps, a Torgue pistol, and the cheap tips, a Hyperion SMG. Both are underrated weapons, and the Craps is especially good. If you want to boost your build and grab some great weapons at the same time, then Jackpot is a great target for that. Time now for the Agonizer 9000, a mech boss who you fight around here at the very end of the Guts of Carnivora. Agonizer 9000 is a fully armoured robot with a corrosive health bar and does have an immunity stage, but completing the fight quickly will avoid that and majorly speed up your farming runs. He's not overly difficult, but what makes the fight harder than most is the lack of consistent crit spots. Although they're spotted all over him, they will disappear after taking too much damage. Good choice weapons here are anything corrosive. The Monarch, Lightshow, Tizzy, Flipper all will perform well, but I was able to absolutely annihilate him with the backburner on Moze, which he'll be able to do too. Speaking of the backburner, that is the main reason you'll want to fight him, but you can only get it on Mayhem 6 or above. It's a top tier rocket launcher widely regarded as the best in the game and is simply a must have weapon no matter who you play as. It drops 6.9% of the time, although I had much better results in my short stint. He also has an increased chance to drop the Crater's EMP5 at Mayhem 4 or higher, a unique SMG with a drop rate of 5.7%, and that drop rate is also shared with the Damned, a Blood-Off assault rifle. He drops the Dictator hardly ever, and the White Elephant very rarely as well. On top of all of those dedicated drops, he also spits out a good number of world drops too, relatively speaking, and is definitely worth the farm, especially for rainbow backburners. Now to the Seer, the final boss of the Director's Cut, who you fight around here in Scrya's Crypt. The Seer is a beefy Guardian boss with the same type health bars as the bosses in the Guardian Takedown, a shield and armor followed by another shield. That means you'll want a shock weapon to drain those shields quickly and something corrosive to melt the armor, and each health bar is pretty chunky. As soon as you whittle her health down enough, she will disappear into the fog as a host of enemies are summoned to attack you. She's not completely gone though, just hard to see, so the key to this fight is keeping an eye on her so you can break her out of her cloak as soon as she activates it. She is the only source of the Director's Cut class mods, which are all good, especially Amara's, and will drop 40.8% of the time for whichever Vault Hunter you are. The Rocket Pod, a Blood-Off launcher, also has the same drop chance, and she'll drop other Director's Cut loot too. If you're looking for some Purple Tree class mods and Director's Cut loot but don't want to struggle as much or spend Iridium, then the Seer has those bases covered. Coming in hot is Freddie the Traitor, a repeatable farm that you can set up right here in the VIP tower. To start off, you'll need to kill a bunch of loader bots to get him to spawn, but once he does, it's rinse and repeat. That's because after defeating him, you can teleport to the start, run back, and he'll be there again. He's like that salesman that's trying to sell you vintage fedoras who just won't go away, but he's much better looking. It's a fantastic strategy that will have the floor littered with legendaries in no time, and when I was farming him, he seemed to just spontaneously combust whenever I looked into his eyes, so it's an easy farm too. He's the only source for the auto aim, an OK sniper rifle that you'll find every time you kill him, but you'll also find other DLC gear and base game world drops too. Because of the lack of save and quit, this farm is great, but it always looks better than what it is, as half the floor is literally the same gun. If you can look past that though, this farm will set you up with a load of legendaries in very little time. Up next is a raid boss like no other, Hemovorous the Invincible. He's found in Darkthirst Dominion as part of the Director's Cut for the cost of a whopping 500 Iridium. Defeating Hemovorous isn't an easy feat. He's a Varkid that evolves as you defeat him. From his final pod, 2 massive Varkids will spawn, although Hemovorous will be the only one that drops loot. For the fight, you want to use some tried and true boss stoppers like the Tizzy or Backburner, and you want fire and corrosive versions. The big draw for Hemo is the exclusive location for the Company Man artifacts, which boost a particular manufacturer's stats dramatically and will drop all the time. He also drops other Director's Cut gear as well drops and has dedicated chances for an Atlas Replay, Ringer and Ionic Disruptor at 25% each. He's definitely worth farming for those artifacts especially, just make sure you teleport to the start after defeating him so you don't waste your Iridium. Moving on now to Wotan the Invincible, the final boss of the Melee 1 takedown. Wotan is an engaging fight that is both fun and rewarding. They have multiple stages that are each different from the last and drop a load of great legendaries too, especially with their buff a little while back. Because you're fighting a robot and we're not talking Mr. Krabs, you want a corrosive weapon. A Light Show Monarch Tizzy are all decent enough, but something like the Backburner will ignore his shields and help speed up the first half of the fight if you're not into aiming. It's also a fight that you can repeat. Killing Wotan's bottom half and then dying will see that loot littered on the floor and spawn you halfway through instead of at the start, making it a much more worthwhile farm. Speaking of worthwhile, it definitely is, as they are the only drop source of some top tier SMGs like the Kive's Worth, which deals splash damage, and the Redistributor, which is a chain gun great for mobbing. They also drop the Moonfire, an amp pistol, and the Tig's Boom, a meteor shotgun. Each of those legendaries drop 14% of the time, but you'll also find a load of world drops there too, especially if you take out his brain and finish off its legs. Farming Wotan is incredibly rewarding, stocking up your backpack with top tier loot and some random base game surprises. Moving on now to Heavyweight Harker, the final boss of Arms Race, and by final boss I mean the main guy you can fight at any time around here. The best method for farming him is to open a few chests around the perimeter and then drop in. There's nothing worse than spending too long finding weapons only to fall short at the end. The difficulty of this fight varies massively considering the gear you have changes in each run of Arms Race, but there are some things that will improve your chances and speed it up. The main thing you want is a TD or weapon, preferably an SMG. Their reload effect provides heavy damage and will get the job done quick. If you're unable to do that, then having an elemental weapon for each of his 3 health bars will do wonderfully. It's also a good idea to buy a decent grenade before you go in for added damage. Arms Race holds some of the best weapons in the game. The Plasma Coil, a top tier rapid burst firing SMG, the Tizzy, a rapid firing pistol that's exceptional on the bossing front, and the Infernal Wish, a brand new top tier shield that'll double the damage of many weapons, just to name a few. The drop rates here aren't great though, especially considering they added new weapons through the Director's Cut patch, and the drop rates now sit between 5 and 10%, but considering the large number of powerful gear found here, Heavyweight Harker is well worth the time to farm. Before number 1 is uncovered, let's go over some honourable mentions. First up is Captain Traunt, a boss who you fight here at the very end of Athenas. It takes a little while to run all the way here, but even an ice wall won't keep you from Captain Traunt's embrace. He's a melee 1 heavy that's eaten too much pizza. He resists fire and ice using attacks from those elements, and has a large shield and a smaller health bar. The best weapon types for Traunt are anything shock, but radiation will generally perform better. On Mayhem 4 or higher, he's dedicated to dropping the Tankman's shield, a Hyperion sniper rifle which isn't all that great and has a 13.5% chance to drop. But it's at Mayhem 6 where this farm kicks off, as the Cowson will appear 16.5% of the time. The Cowson is a powerful explosive SMG that has a wide range of variants. It's definitely the highlight of this farm, and it will offer up 1 to 2 will drops to sweeten the deal. Up next is Grave Ward, who you fight here in the floating tomb on Eden 6. What's great about Grave Ward is that he's literally a travel point away. Unlike most bosses who are at the end of their levels, Grave Ward is the level, making it easy to farm him at any time. He's not particularly hard either, just take an incendiary weapon with you and aim at the glowing yellow circle on his chest. Or you can even wait for his arm to pop out to deal even more damage. He drops the Lob, an elemental shotgun that fires orbs which pass right through your enemies, and is also the only source of the Brawler Ward shield, a great component to any melee builds, and the Grave, an artifact. All 3 of those legendaries drop 10% of the time, and he's a good source of others too. For a quick fight and an easy one, Grave Ward is one of the best. The last honourable mentions I have for you is the 2 bosses from the Guardian Takedown. Both are difficult with unique attack and immunity phases, but even traversing minus prime can be deadly. The Guardian Takedown takes over 30 minutes to complete on average, and there's no quick farm method either. The only thing that makes it worth the time is the legendary gear. For Anathema, its opening boss, she is the only drop source of the Stinger, a fantastic melee based Nova shield, and the Lightspeed, a top tier grenade, both dropping 29% of the time. Wotan the Invincible on the other hand drops the Smog, a Hyperion SMG, the Globetrotter, a COV blade launcher, and the Web Slinger, a unique assault rifle, which each drop about 25% of the time. All this gear can be lived without quite comfortably, although the Stinger is the one with the most draw, especially for melee focused builds. Number 1, we're here, we made it, and which boss holds the crown of Borderlands 3's best punching bag? It's Cormash Potatoes, the first boss of the Bounty of Blood add-on that you fight around here in Ashfall Peaks. Cormash is probably the easiest boss on this list. They have a flesh health bar making them weak to fire, and their attacks can be easily avoided. Treat this fight as you would taking on your average hardened mob, but just know the loot is great. I expected the Ruiner to take this spot, but it turns out Cormash is your one-stop shop for all the great legendary gear in DLC 3. Take the Root, the Flipper, the Light Show, all can be dropped by him, although relatively rarely, but it's a buffet that serves up random delights, closer to 2 on average. There is one delight that keeps coming back though, and that is the Stone Thrower, a Jacob's assault rifle that can only be dropped by him. It drops apparently 50% of the time, but I didn't see it that way. Overall though, Cormash is a great boss to farm, serving up all the top tier weaponry from DLC 3 that players can't go without. So that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned of the top 10 best bosses to farm for legendary loot in Borderlands 3. If you did, consider dropping a like or subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one.